Somewhere on your phone right now, there's a setting you have never opened. You have never even seen the screen it lives on. It is not hidden by some conspiracy, and no engineer at Samsung or Apple is trying to keep it from you on purpose. But here's the strange part. Almost everyone who finds it and changes it correctly says the same thing afterward. Their data feels different. Pages load before they expect them to. Videos stop circling that little buffering wheel. And the question nobody seems to ask out loud is simple. If this setting exists, and if it works, why does almost nobody know it is there? That question is where this really starts. Because the truth is not that your carrier is hiding something sinister from you. The truth is something quieter, and in a way more frustrating. Your phone was built to work for the average person in the average situation, doing the average thing. It was not built for you, specifically in your house, on your street, with your carrier, on your specific combination of hardware and software. The settings that ship by default are a compromise. They are tuned to avoid complaints, not to maximize performance. And buried inside that compromise is a handful of configurations that, when corrected, can change how your data behaves in ways that feel almost unbelievable the first time you see it. Here's where it gets interesting. The setting people are searching for when they type in something like secret phone setting for faster data is not actually one setting. It is a cluster of them hiding in 3 different places, doing 3 different jobs, and almost nobody realizes they are connected. Most tech content treats them as separate, unrelated tips. Change your APN. Try this. Turn off background data. Try that. Force this network mode. Try the other thing. But when you understand how they relate to each other, the picture changes completely. You start to see that your phone is not slow because of bad luck. It is slow because 3 quiet decisions, made by default, are working against you at the same time, and you were never shown the dashboard where you can override them. Let's start with the first one, because it is the one almost nobody touches. And it is the one with the strangest name. It is called the APN, short for Access Point Name, and think about what that phrase actually implies. Access, point, name. It sounds bureaucratic, almost boring, the kind of phrase you would skip past in a settings menu without a second thought. But this single configuration is the literal handshake between your device and your carrier's data network. Every byte your phone sends or receives passes through this gateway first. And here is the part that should make you pause. Most phones never ask you to verify it. They auto-load a generic profile the moment your SIM card is recognized. And that profile is built to be safe and broadly compatible, not optimized for your specific carrier's fastest available configuration. Think about what that means. You could be paying for a 5G plan, sitting inside full 5G coverage with a brand new phone capable of gigabit speeds, and still be quietly bottlenecked because the access point your phone is using was never updated to point toward the carrier's full-speed gateway. Carriers update these configurations constantly as they expand their networks, and your phone, in most cases, has no built-in mechanism that forces it to recheck and adopt the newest version automatically. It just keeps using whatever was loaded the day you inserted the SIM, sometimes years ago, sometimes on a completely different software version. According to current carrier documentation circulating in 2026, outdated or incorrect APN profiles are still one of the most common causes of unexplained slow data, dropped MMS, and inconsistent 5G access, especially on unlocked phones and phones that switched carriers without a full factory reset. Read that again. Switching carriers without a reset can leave your phone partially loyal to the network it left behind. But here's where it gets worse. This is not a one-time problem you fix and forget. Every time a carrier rolls out new infrastructure, expands a 5G band, or migrates customers to a new core network, there's a real chance the old APN values get quietly deprecated, while your phone keeps using them anyway, because nothing forces an update. You're not failing to use 5G because your phone cannot reach it. You are failing to use it because the gateway address your phone is dialing was written for a network configuration that may no longer be the fastest path available. This is not a flaw in your phone. It is a flaw in the silence between your phone and your carrier, a gap where nobody is responsible for checking, and so nobody checks. So what happens when you actually go in and fix it? According to documented carrier guides for major networks, correcting an outdated or generic APN profile and replacing it with the carrier's current optimized profile can restore full access to faster network tiers, fix intermittent disconnects, and in some testing scenarios produce speed differences that are not small. One independent test that recently circulated showed a single device moving from roughly 30 megabits per second up to 262 megabits per second, purely by switching between different APN configurations on the same carrier, in the same location, on the same day. Let that sink in for a second. Same phone, same spot, same network. An 8 times difference in measured speed created entirely by which gateway profile the phone was told to use. This is not chaos. This is infrastructure, and infrastructure has rules, and most people are simply never shown the rulebook. Now, before this turns into something it should not be, there has to be an honest pause here, because dramatic claims without nuance are exactly how misinformation spreads, and that is the opposite of what this is supposed to be. Not every device, in every location, on every carrier, will see a result anywhere close to that. Some phones already have the correct profile loaded from the start, and for those devices, changing the APN will do nothing, because there was nothing broken to fix. The honest, sourced reality, repeated across multiple carrier and telecom documentation sources, is this. APN settings do not magically multiply your speed beyond what your plan and your coverage allow. What they do is remove an artificial ceiling that exists only when the configuration is wrong. If your data has felt randomly slow, randomly unstable, or strangely worse than friends on the same carrier in the same building, an incorrect APN is one of the most overlooked, least dramatic, and most fixable explanations. It will not turn a weak signal into a strong one, but it can be the difference between your phone using the fast lane it is already entitled to, and using a slower, older lane out of pure inertia. And this is where everything changes, because once you understand the APN, the next layer makes far more sense, and it has almost nothing to do with the network itself. It has to do with what your phone decides to prioritize, second by second, without telling you. Every modern smartphone has a setting, sometimes labeled network mode, sometimes labeled preferred network type, that controls which generation of network your phone is allowed to use. Most phones default to auto, which sounds reasonable on the surface. Let the phone decide. Let it pick whatever is strongest. But auto is not the same as optimal, and this is the part most people never question. Auto mode is designed primarily to prevent dropped calls and maintain connection stability across changing conditions, not to guarantee you the fastest possible data speed in every moment. In practice, that means your phone is constantly making a judgment call between connection reliability and raw throughput, and reliability almost always wins, because a dropped call generates a complaint and a slightly slower download does not. What most people are not seeing is how aggressively this switching happens in real time. As you move through your day, your phone is silently negotiating between 5G, 4G, LTE, and sometimes even older standards, multiple times per minute, based on signal strength, tower congestion, and battery optimization routines running in the background. According to 2026 telecom testing data, in areas with strong, stable 5G coverage, users have measured download speeds ranging from roughly 500 megabits per second up toward a full gigabit. But in areas with weak or inconsistent 5G coverage, forcing a connection onto 5G can actually produce worse results than simply allowing the phone to fall back onto 4G LTE, because your device starts spending more energy and more processing time searching for a high-frequency signal that is not reliably there, instead of just using the stable, lower-frequency 4G signal that is. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. This is not a hypothetical. The technology behind most current 5G deployments, known as non-standalone or NSA 5G, is built on top of the existing 4G core network. That means even when your phone shows a 5G icon, it is often still quietly relying on a 4G connection underneath for essential control functions like maintaining calls and messages. Your phone is not purely on 5G. It is straddling two networks simultaneously, and that dual connection comes with a real cost. Multiple 2026 battery analyses describe this as a kind of structural tax, with 5G consuming somewhere between 6 and 11% more battery than 4G LTE on average, not because 5G itself is inefficient, but because the phone is frequently managing two network layers at once, especially in NSA deployments. Think about what that means for someone in a weak coverage zone. Their phone is burning extra battery, hunting for a 5G signal that barely reaches them, switching back and forth between towers, and the resulting data speed is sometimes worse than if 5G search had never been triggered at all. This is the part nobody explains clearly, because it sounds counterintuitive. Newer is not automatically faster. Newer, in a weak signal environment, can be the very thing slowing you down. But here's where the story shifts again, because there are two completely different audiences hiding inside this one explanation, and the correct setting for one is the wrong setting for the other. If you live or work in an area with strong, consistent 5G coverage, manually forcing your phone into 5G or even 5G only mode, where supported, can produce more stable, lower latency performance than leaving it on auto, because it stops the phone from second-guessing itself and dropping back to 4G unnecessarily. Documented user reports and 2026 testing guides describe meaningful reductions in round-trip latency and steadier, more predictable download speeds when this is done correctly in a strong signal zone. But if you live or work somewhere with patchy, inconsistent, or weak 5G, the smarter move, according to the same testing sources, is almost the opposite. Forcing your phone onto 4G LTE only, deliberately turning off the 5G search entirely, can produce a more stable connection, noticeably better battery life, and in some cases, faster real-world speeds than a 5G icon that is technically present but functionally unreliable. This is the moment where the so-called secret setting actually reveals itself, and it is not what people expect. The secret is not a single switch that says, make data faster. The secret is that the correct network mode is not universal. It depends entirely on where you are standing, and almost nobody is told that the icon on their screen does not always mean what they think it means. A 5G symbol does not guarantee 5G performance. It only guarantees that your phone has detected a 5G signal worth attempting to use, regardless of whether that attempt is actually helping you. And this is where the deeper layer of this story starts to take shape, because there is a third setting working underneath all of this, quietly, and it has nothing to do with towers, signals, or generations of network technology at all. It has to do with what your phone allows to run in the background while you are not even looking at it. Modern smartphones manage dozens of applications simultaneously, many of which continue syncing, refreshing, uploading, and checking for updates, even when you're not actively using them. This is by design. Email needs to refresh, messaging apps need to stay connected, cloud photo backups need to sync. But here is what most people are not seeing. Every one of these background processes is competing for the exact same limited data pipeline that your active app, the one you're actually staring at, is trying to use. When you open a video and it buffers, or a web page that should load instantly instead crawls, it is not always because your network connection is weak. Sometimes it is because 5 other applications are quietly uploading backups, checking for updates, or refreshing content in the background, consuming bandwidth you assumed was entirely yours. The real story is that your phone was never designed to tell you this is happening in real time. There is no constant visible indicator showing you that your cloud backup app just started a large upload exactly when you opened a streaming app. You simply experience the symptom, slow loading, without ever seeing the cause. And because the cause is invisible, people reach for the explanation that feels most obvious, blaming their carrier, blaming their phone's age, blaming bad luck, when the actual culprit is sitting quietly in a settings menu most users have never opened. A menu that lists every single app and whether it is allowed to use data while running in the background. This is where the escalation becomes personal, because the more apps you have installed, the worse this invisible competition becomes. Every additional app is another potential background process fighting for the same limited slice of bandwidth, and on phones with dozens of installed apps, this congestion can become a constant, low-level drag on performance that never fully goes away, even with perfect signal and a perfectly optimized APN. According to current mobile optimization guidance, restricting background data on non-essential apps, especially ones that sync large files like cloud photo backups or auto-updating media apps, is one of the most consistently effective ways to free up real-world throughput for whatever you are actively trying to do, because it removes invisible competition rather than trying to outrun it. Now picture all 3 of these layers stacked on top of each other, because that is the real picture nobody shows you in a single place. An outdated APN profile quietly limiting which gateway and which network tier your phone is even allowed to reach. A network mode set to auto, making moment-to-moment trade-offs between stability and speed that may not match your actual environment. And a background data system, invisible and constant, letting a dozen apps compete for bandwidth you thought was exclusively yours. Individually, each one feels like a minor inconvenience. Together, they form a kind of structural ceiling on your phone's performance, one that has nothing to do with your data plan, your carrier's advertised speeds, or how much you're paying every month. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you a little. None of this is a conspiracy. Nobody designed these 3 layers to work against you on purpose. But the result is functionally identical to one. You are paying for a certain tier of network access, and silently, through nobody's deliberate malice, you may not be receiving the full value of what you are paying for, simply because 3 default configurations were never built to be personalized to your specific situation. So what does the actual fix look like? Stripped of hype, stripped of miracle tool language, grounded only in what is documented and verifiable. It starts with checking and, if necessary, manually updating your APN settings to match your carrier's current official configuration, available directly from your carrier's support pages rather than from random unofficial lists circulating online, because using an unverified or unofficial APN profile carries its own risk, including potential security exposure and unexpected charges if the profile routes through unapproved gateways. It continues with testing your network mode deliberately, rather than leaving it permanently on auto and assuming that is automatically correct. In areas with strong 5G, manually selecting 5G or a 5G preferred mode can produce more consistent results. In areas with weak or inconsistent 5G, manually forcing 4G LTE only can often outperform a 5G connection that exists in name only. And it finishes with auditing background data permissions app by app, identifying which applications genuinely need constant background access, like messaging and email, and which ones, like rarely used social apps or auto-syncing services you forgot were even installed, are quietly consuming bandwidth for no benefit you actually notice. But here is the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this, the one that most videos promising a single secret setting conveniently leave out. None of these 3 fixes will turn a fundamentally weak signal into a strong one. None of them will make a congested tower in a crowded stadium suddenly handle your traffic instantly. None of them will overcome a data plan that has already been throttled after you exceeded your monthly high-speed allowance, because that kind of throttling happens at the carrier's network level, far outside anything a phone setting can override. If your data plan includes a deprioritization clause, once you cross a certain usage threshold, no APN change, no network mode switch, and no background data restriction will undo that, because the limitation is not coming from your device at all. It is coming from an agreement you may not have fully read when you signed up. This is the moment where the story has to widen out, because the real tension here is not really about phone settings at all. It is about a much larger pattern playing out quietly across the entire mobile industry. Carriers build networks advertised at their absolute maximum theoretical speeds, the kind of numbers you see in commercials, gigabit this, ultra capacity that. But the actual experience delivered to any individual user depends on a chain of decisions stacked one on top of another, decisions made by device manufacturers, by carriers, by app developers, and by default software configurations, almost none of which were made with your specific situation in mind. You are, in effect, living inside the average outcome of millions of compromises. And the so-called secret settings are simply the places where that average outcome can be nudged back toward what is actually available to you, rather than what was assumed to be good enough for everyone. And this raises a bigger, more uncomfortable question that most people never stop to ask. If a handful of configuration choices, sitting quietly in menus most users have never opened, can meaningfully change how a network performs, what does that say about how often the rest of us are simply accepting this is just how my data is as a fact of life, when in reality it might be a fixable artifact of settings nobody ever explained? How many complaints about slow phones, blamed on aging hardware or unfair carriers, were actually rooted in a forgotten APN profile, or a network mode mismatch that nobody thought to check? How many times has someone upgraded to a brand new, more expensive phone chasing better performance when the actual bottleneck was sitting unchanged in a background data setting the entire time, untouched by the upgrade? There is something almost unsettling about how much of our daily digital experience is shaped by configurations we never see, never choose, and never question, simply because the systems around us are built to function adequately without our intervention, not optimally with it. The phone in your pocket right now is making dozens of these silent decisions every single minute, deciding which network generation to chase, which gateway to dial, which apps get to quietly use your bandwidth while you're not looking. And for the overwhelming majority of people, none of that will ever surface as anything more concrete than a vague, persistent feeling that their phone feels slow sometimes without ever knowing why, and without ever realizing that an answer, or at least part of one, was sitting 3 menus deep the entire time. So where does this leave you? Probably with more questions than you started with, and that is not an accident, because the honest answer to what is the secret setting that makes your data faster is not a single switch. It is a layered, slightly frustrating truth that the real lever is awareness, knowing that your APN might be outdated, knowing that auto network mode is not automatically the best choice for your specific location, knowing that invisible apps are quietly competing for your bandwidth in the background right now. Once you know where to look, the fix itself takes minutes, but almost nobody is told where to look in the first place, and that gap between what is technically possible and what is commonly known is where this entire story actually lives. What else, hiding in plain sight inside a settings menu you have never opened, is quietly shaping your daily experience without your permission? And once you start asking that question about your phone, how long before you start asking it about everything else running invisibly around you?